You've probably heard the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Well, in the world of financial forecasting, that's not just a saying, it's the law of the land. The quality of your prediction, no matter how fancy your model is, can only ever be as good as the data you feed it. Today, we're putting on our skeptic's hat to really dig into data quality, and we're going to start with a classic story of a forecast that went spectacularly wrong, and why it's a perfect lesson for all of us.
I mean, how often do you hear someone just come right out and admit to a massive public failure like this? This one quote, this incredibly honest admission, really sets the stage for everything we're talking about today. Because when a forecast goes wrong, it's not just a mistake. It's a masterclass in why the tiniest details in your source data matter more than absolutely anything else.
All right, so let's jump in our time machine and head back to 1992. We're going to dissect this specific case piece by piece to see how a prediction that looked so solid could just completely fall apart. And trust me, this isn't just a political history lesson. It's about understanding the anatomy of a forecasting failure with insights that every single market analyst needs to hear.
Okay, so picture this. It's early 1992, and the forecast is clear, an easy win for George H.W. Bush. But then, as summer rolls around, something's not quite right. Clinton's campaign is way stronger than expected. Then, the real bombshell drops in the fall. A new, critical piece of data surfaces. And by November, the original forecast is in shambles. Clinton wins. The whole prediction had unraveled.
And boom, here it is, the smoking gun. The entire forecast was built on a single piece of data, a birth time for Bill Clinton that was chosen simply because it felt right. It seemed to match his personality. But when the actual verified birth certificate time came out later, it told a completely different story. In fact, it showed what was called a classic winning combination. So here's the key. The model itself wasn't wrong. The data fed into it was pure garbage.
So, this one story, it's really just a perfect window into a much, much bigger problem. It pulls back the curtain on the fundamental challenge that every analyst faces, whether they're on Wall Street or in Washington. And that's the anatomy of bad data.
At the end of the day, it all boils down to this one simple idea: data veracity, which is just a fancy way of asking, is your information accurate and reliable? The reality is, forecasters are always working with incomplete and sometimes just plain wrong data. This isn't the exception to the rule, it is the rule of the game.
And this problem gets way, way harder when you're dealing with old data. I mean, think about it. Historians still argue about the exact time of events from the colonial era. Those records are often vague and really hard to source. Now, compare that to modern digital records, right? Stock trades timed down to the nanosecond. They're obviously way better, but as the Clinton example shows, even they are not immune to error, not by a long shot. And, this is exactly why analysts, when they have a choice, will almost always grab the most recent data they can find. It's not because they're obsessed with what's new, it's because recent data is just more trustworthy. The timing is usually more accurate, it's easier to check against other sources, and it gives you a much sharper picture of what's happening right now.
So if we know data can be messy, we just fix it, right? Well, not so fast. The methods we use to try and fix bad data are themselves pretty flawed. And this is where things get really tangled, because now we have to start talking about human psychology, our own biases, and even the strategic games people play in the market.
Okay, so there's this process called rectification that analysts use to try and nail down a correct time. It's kind of like being a detective. You take the known facts, major life events like a company's IPO or a huge market crash, and you work backward to figure out a start time that makes all those events line up perfectly with your model.
But, and this is a huge but, the experts themselves will tell you this whole process is shaky at best. It's incredibly difficult to master, and even then, it's not completely reliable. Really, the only way you can start to trust a rectified time is if several different analysts all come up with the same answer, or if it starts making predictions that actually come true. It's a solution that's full of its own problems.
And if that wasn't enough, you have to pile on all these other human and system-level issues. You've got personal bias, right? An analyst might just not bother to double-check the data for a forecast they think is unimportant. Then you have the weird world of financial markets. A really popular prediction can actually cause the market to move, becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. And at the same time, the big players, the giant hedge funds, they deliberately hide their moves to keep their advantage. It's a minefield of uncertainty.
All right, so with all these challenges, what's a smart, skeptical analyst supposed to do? This is where we pivot from the problems to the solutions. It's time to build a practical toolkit for thinking critically about data and protecting ourselves from these risks. Let's connect these dots directly to your wallet. An unverified timestamp, like the one from our 1992 case study, that can lead you to completely blow your market timing, costing you real money. Relying on just a single source for your information, that's just asking for trouble. If that one source is wrong, your whole model collapses. And ignoring data just because it doesn't fit your theory, that's called confirmation bias. And it's a fast track to some very painful losses.
So here's what you need to be on the lookout for. Think of these as giant, flashing red lights. Are you getting conflicting stories from different sources? Is the timing for a key event kind of vague? Does the data not really line up with major, known events? If you find yourself nodding along to any of these, it's time to hit the brakes and start asking some tough questions.
And here's a simple game plan you can actually use. First off, never ever trust just one source. Cross-reference everything. Use big public events like earnings calls or Fed announcements as anchors to make sure your timeline is solid. Like we talked about, always lean towards using recent, clean data. And if you have holes in your data, try to fill them by looking at related info, like checking a company's suppliers to get a better sense of its health. It's all about building a more complete, reliable picture.
So, when you boil it all down, what's the big lesson here? It's this. I don't care how powerful our computers get or how slick our automated trading models become, they are all, without exception, vulnerable to that garbage in, garbage out principle. Human oversight, a healthy dose of skepticism, and just plain old critical thinking aren't just nice-to-haves. They are your last and best line of defense against a really bad forecast.
Which brings us to one last big question to chew on. We're all chasing accuracy, right? We build these incredibly complex models to try and see into the future. But if the very foundation we're building on, the data itself, is fundamentally flawed and incomplete, well, is the whole idea of perfect foresight just a mirage? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.